label on their product. So I'm very much hoping that there will be more regulatory action to kind of cleanse the market from all those misleading allegations, whether it comes under the form of a label or any form of allegations, so allegations really like the use of certain words, but also images. I mean, it's really impressive to see images, especially on animal-based products, and how misleading they are. And it's not regulated under EU law, and usually not so much regulated under national laws either. So in order to have those good labels like the V label or reliable labels to really deliver the information, the reliable information that they're meant to deliver to consumers, there's also some work to be done to really get rid of all this misleading information. So that might be a factor. I'm thinking if I were a food producer, do I want to, add yet another label, another sort of allegation or claim on my product? And at the moment, I don't know if they want to do that. So something that maybe we could try to convince policymakers of doing is really be serious about banning misleading information on food products.
And Alice, let's stay with you. I'm going to ask you a first question about enforcement of the current regulations. So we've got the EU regulation 1169 from 2011 that provides general rules and principles that member states must follow to guarantee access to information for consumers. In 2024, Greenwashing Institute, we have conducted research and we analyzed the menus from more than 1,200 schools all over Poland. Primary schools, which is where the mass catering actually operates. And our research shows that schools definitely fail to provide information not only about whether the given food is plant-based, entirely plant-based, or contains animal products, but also about many allergens. And so my question to you, what resources are available to food advocates to address this very urgent issue?
Sure, yeah, and I love that you did this research because very few people know that actually the FIC regulation, so regulation 1169, also applies to mass caterers and including public, public vendors, including school cafeterias, and that school children are actually considered final consumers in regulation 1169. And as final consumers, they are entitled to benefit from the general principles of the FIC regulation, and I actually looked at the regulation, which says that final consumers must receive information, and I quote, related to consumers' health and the safe use of a food. So we can think about allergens here, but more generally, so allergens such as milk and eggs, which are on the list of the regulatory list of allergens that must be communicated to consumers. But more generally, beyond the question of allergens, consumers must be informed, and I quote again, on the identity and composition properties and other characteristics of a food. So, in my opinion, schools that do not disclose, information as important as the presence of animal-based products in the food they serve are very likely to be in a position to be liable to breach EU law. Now turning to what food advocates can do, because the EU relies on member states to implement and enforce legislation. One solution is for food advocates in those member states that witness those breaches taking place, to turn to national competent authorities. So it usually means some administration under the Ministry of Agriculture, to raise awareness about those non-compliances, try to convince them to take regulatory action, actions like sending a warning, more inspections. And if that doesn't work, I mean, you can also challenge non-compliances in court and challenge the authorities that are responsible for making sure that EU legislation is applied to court. So those are the options.
Thank you. And let's move to Olivier. Are you ready? So El Socoton is working to halve the number of animals killed for meat in France by 2030, which is the main goal of the Rescue of the Century campaign. And given the goal of making plant-based options both accessible and appealing, what specific and strategic role should food labeling play in the market to influence consumer choices, facilitate change, and ultimately contribute to achieving the goal of 2030?
Yes, indeed. So the aim of our organization, L2.4, is to reduce by half the number of animals that we kill and eat by 2030. It looks quite ambitious. It is. But also it's very aligned with what scientists say. So we have to change, we have to do that. And so, of course, labeling is very important in that matter. But if we, tonight we are talking about a vegan label, and we know that vegans are still quite scarce around the population. So whenever we think about that, we've got to keep in mind that we have to normalize veganism, but also we've got to appeal to people who are not vegan as of yet. Just to people who'd like only to reduce a little bit, step by step, the amount of animal that they eat. And so we've got to make sure that any label, any thought that we've got around this topic do not antagonize people, because we know, I've said that in the first question, we know that as of today, veganism means being socially marginalized. So we got to keep that in mind. I'd like to tell you about the Indian example of food labeling. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's fairly easy. I know it would be another label, sorry Alice. But on every food that is packaged in India and served in restaurants, you got a little dot. It's either brown reddish, or green. Green means vegetarian, and it's a bit specific because I believe that you can have dairy and milk, but no eggs. If you've got eggs, it's brown. So it's not a label about vegan, but it's just vegetarian or meat. And so it's not only the vegan products that would have to bear a label, it would be any food, especially the animal products, because we're talking about transparency for vegan products, but also, like, why put a label, another one, to the collection just for vegan products? I mean, that would be interesting also to reverse the trend and to say, okay, you too, animal products have to bear this label. And also, I'd like to go back to how do we normalize veganism, and we have to ask ourselves that, because it's very important not to shoot ourselves in the foot while thinking about adding a vegan label to a package.
Thank you, Olivier. Olga, I would like to direct next question to you. Olga, someone who is very much familiar with the inner working of both the European Parliament and the European Commission, and who has deep understanding of the history and everything what was happening with the proposed sustainable food system law, and assuming that in the very ideal world it will return to the Commission's agenda, what specific mandatory front-of-pack food labeling provisions should ideally be included in this law?
Regarding the sustainable food systems framework, the previous panel already mentioned it a number of times. I'm afraid that this is not, because this proposal rather was supposed to be quite comprehensive, and it was part of the farm to fork strategy. So therefore, it's not just, as previously said, that the SFS actually never made it, never saw the light of day, but it was the farm to fork strategy itself that basically most of the proposals there that were mentioned actually never saw the light of day either. So I think and I hope that eventually there will be a sustainable food systems proposal, but perhaps not as comprehensive. And hopefully in the not too distant future, because under this parliament, it's right now it's difficult to envision this. In regards to specific provisions, certainly I see the need for a label that is quite visible, and as was said earlier, there are many labels out there. Last time the Commission actually had a count, it was in the hundreds, and then actually there are probably thousands of labels. So it is difficult to, have the vegan label stand out among all of those. So there is competition also, let's not forget this. But we need a label that is easily understood by the consumers. And here, we are all consumers, we are citizens and consumers, and we're voters too. So therefore, wearing the consumer hat, I think we can all understand and we know what we want. It's definitely a label that is that needs to stand out more than others. And I have to say something though in regards to the wording itself, because the word vegan, whether we like it or not, as was said previously also, carries a lot of heavy baggage, let's say. It has been connected to an ideology, and I fully support that. It's actually not just about food, it is about a worldview, it's about a way of life, and this scares people. So if we want to, we need to also consider if things move smoothly, do we want to use the vegan word, or do we want to use perhaps choose other wording that is perceived as more neutral, and perhaps people have a friendlier approach, especially because we are talking about politicians, and regardless of what we like and what we believe in, we also need to persuade others. And this is not easy, certainly not in this term.
Thank you very much. And going to Julia, we can see what happened to the regulation on the deforestation and how it was weakened, how the process of cutting out was happening, of its essential provision looked like, and everything. We saw delays in its entry into force. Based on this example, could you say what organizations, social partners, those organizations that stand on the side of the consumers could do differently to actually better uphold planned and more ambitious legislations?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really important question. I think that it kind of links to my first answer. I think it's important to really understand all the sectors that are affected by a legislation, and try to, I think in the case of the EU deforestation regulation, we did that with some sectors. We developed an extensive understanding of the cocoa sector, and there was support from the cocoa sector for the regulation, and we kind of co-developed positioning on what it should look like. We didn't do that with the timber sector. I think that we should have, because they're the main resistance now. It's actually not the meat sector, it's more the timber sector. I wish that we had spent more time speaking to good faith actors in the timber sector, because there are some, and trying to hear from them what approach works best. And also just to socialize the concept with some parts of the industry so that it wasn't coming. I think they didn't anticipate that it would affect them, because the European timber sector, the whole narrative around the EU deforestation regulation was about tropical deforestation. And so I think European timber producers thought, well, this isn't about us, this is about Brazil, or it's about the Congo, or it's about Indonesia. And I think NGOs didn't take the time to inform them, because maybe we hoped they wouldn't notice, because they're very powerful. But I think that has maybe come back to bite us in the end. So if I were to do it again, I would start engagement with the timber sector much earlier. I also, this discussion is interesting because I've never really thought about a vegan label before. So I also have a question, which maybe others on the panel can answer. I went to the very interesting event in Copenhagen in the in the autumn that was hosted by the Danish Vegetarian Society, and there was about the Danish Action Plan, and there was a really interesting panel with retailers that were talking about meeting their protein rebalancing targets and what works and what doesn't work. And one really interesting thing that really stuck with me was they were saying products sell much better when you don't call them vegan or when you don't call them plant-based, but when you call them sweet potato and black bean burger, or you just say what's in it. So how do we balance, I think, the legitimate need of people who are vegans to know what's in their food versus not putting people off and trying to bring in people who maybe don't identify as vegans but would be quite open to eating more plant-based foods? Because I think that the word plant-based also, everything quickly gets sucked into that framing, even if we rename it. So how do we balance those things? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And if you could pass the microphone to Alice. So Alice, going back to you, I'm sorry for jumping so much with the microphone. I hope you don't mind. So measures aiming to restrict the use of certain words, and it was already mentioned before, to designate plant-based substitutes to animal-based products affects the consumer's rights to be informed about the use of plant-based alternatives. So further reinforcing this point, school dietitians report that they often hear that children are much more willing to eat pasta if it's called vegan bolognese or plant-based bolognese as opposed to pasta with soy granules. In your opinion, could it be argued that these types of restrictions on the use of certain words infringe on consumers' rights to make informed food choices?
I mean, obviously, you heard the reaction of people when you use it's jargon. Nobody understands what it is, and nobody would think of calling beef pasta with beef granules. This obviously, it definitely infringes on consumers' right to make informed decisions to the extent that it doesn't make the information available to them. So I don't even know if those children, actually want to eat plant-based pasta, or just because they simply understand what it is more than, using the term granules. But yeah, this obviously goes against, any form of principle shaping consumers' rights to being informed.
Thank you very much. And Olivier, back to you, jumping from Alice. We're seeing a significant decline in the market of plant-based meat and dairy alternatives. We're seeing a very significant decline in the access to plant-based foods, and at the same time, increasing polarization exploited by interest groups in this area. In 2021, so it was 5 years ago, you were one of the leaders of the Stop EU Meat Ads campaign, which highlighted the European Union's policy on funding meat and dairy advertising. We conducted a similar analysis this year and found that over 61 million euro was spent on promoting meat and dairy products. And we're talking here about labeling, about the right to information, but the right to information also includes advertising and promotion, because they have taken the place of health education and climate education. How do you assess the European Union's promotion policy after those 5 years?
Okay, so first about the market for plant-based alternatives. Apparently the figures are quite good in France, surprisingly. A recent survey showed by GFI showed that there was a market increase between 23 and 24 by plus 8.8%. Sales volumes also increased, so there is a market and it's growing. Well, of course, it does not compare to the volume of animal products, but we're going somewhere, and we've got very, very good products in France in terms of plant-based alternative with quite an aggressive marketing, and it's really refreshing to go on the Paris subway and see these beautiful ads. It brings hope, so that's good. And also another figure, Deliveroo. I don't know if it's famous out of France, but yeah, well, anyway, it's an app to have food delivered at home, and they noted an increase by 10% of the orders for vegan meals delivered at home last year. So again, there's room for improvement, but that's something. And also, a recent survey by Health14 showed that 65% of French people agreed with our goal to halve the number of animals that we kill for our food by 2030, which means that they'll have to switch it for plant-based food, of course. They will just not remove the steak and eat the veggies. They will need protein. So yeah, I hope that it brings hope. But going back to the second half of your question regarding the promotion policy, yeah, indeed, we've been quite involved along with Olga, along with Green Rev in 2021 in this campaign, and yeah, apparently nothing really changed. The Commission back then thought about a revision about this this program that provides roughly 200 million euros per year for marketing campaigns. And lately there was a slight, it was not a big change in the volume in the budget, but it improved a little bit. And apparently it's always the same amount of money that is given to the meat sector. And it's really a problem because back then the Commission thought, okay, we've got this program and maybe it's not really in line with, you know, like the environment, health, especially the EU beating cancer plan, because of course red meat is carcinogenic, etc. So back then we led a campaign to make citizens participate in a public consultation. I don't remember the figures, but a lot of citizens asked the Commission to change this program. And so, yeah, nothing really changed. And Desmog lately surveyed, dug into this program to see what was given to whom and what claims were being said by the meat industry. And it's very striking to see that a lot of misleading claims regarding health, regarding the environment, regarding sustainability, misleading claims are being paid by public money. So taxpayers' money goes towards these lies. So of course, this is highly disturbing.
Thank you very much. And to Olga, there's one more question to you. Based on your experience and expertise, could you tell us more about why there's so much resistance to implementing the provision of vegan labeling? I know there's lots to say, but try to be as consistent as possible.
Yeah, well, certainly it goes against powerful interests. It basically shakes up society because unfortunately our society has been based on the exploitation of other species, including our own on many occasions also. So throughout history, we have seen that humans have been using animals, have exploited animals for in every way possible. A vegan label challenges that right from the ground up. So it's not easy to accept this. It's not easy for these powerful interests to accept this. But also, I would say, even for, let's say, the average person who is used to a certain way of life and used to a certain diet, also tradition plays a big role, etc., culture. So a lot of times people don't like change, are afraid of change. So in a way, a vegan label has to face all this resistance because of these reasons. I also like to say that when I saw the title of the event here, labeled "The Future Europe Goes Vegan," I was like, yeah, power to the vegans, yeah, okay. But we also need to be strategic in how we're thinking about pursuing our asks. And in this house right now, certainly the vegan, let's say, using the vegan wording or notions about vegan, etc., are are quite difficult to pursue right now. However, I think, and as was said earlier, I think we have ways to be using other concepts, other notions to include that wording in our argumentation. The right to know is a right for every consumer has, that well, we all have. The right to choose the food we want to eat, the right to have more information. I think these kind of messages in this house at this point in time will be far more, let's say, well received than power to the vegans right now. Maybe in the future.
Thank you so much. And the last question of the panel will be directed to Julia. Plant-based or vegan labeling should also have a very good reference to carbon footprint, of course, including the issue of deforestation and forest destruction for the animal agriculture sector, which is very acceptable and understandable to consumers. How would you combine this? How should it look? How can labeling play an educational role? Because we know that in the case of animal products, there must always be a previous stage, so which is the growing and production of feed. And here, the link between the animal agriculture sector and deforestation is very clear.
Yeah, so I mean, it takes me back many years because, I mean, I have to say we don't support labeling for deforestation. We want it to be illegal to import products that contain deforestation. So we actually spent a whole time fighting back people that wanted to turn it into a labeling initiative. Because what we said was, what's happening is we're destroying precious ecosystems. We're also violating laws. We're violating the land rights of indigenous peoples, which is illegal. It shouldn't be up to the consumer to decide whether I can buy that product or not. We just shouldn't be able to buy that product. So I think on the deforestation angle, the EU deforestation regulation is still there. It has been weakened, but it's still a massively useful tool, and it should come into force at the end of this year, unless they do that again, which I hope they won't. But our hope is really to make it illegal to buy products containing deforestation. So we would not. I think the evidence on environment, and I think it's very different on health. I think on environment, labeling doesn't change consumer behavior very much because there aren't enough people that are motivated by environment that it influences purchasing behavior. And we do see this, for example, in the cocoa sector, where I spent many years working. There are some labels that have quite a high penetration in the sector, like the Rainforest Alliance and Fairtrade. Something like 40% of cocoa is labeled, which is pretty high. But it has done really, not much or nothing to stop deforestation in the sector. So I think we know that on environment, it's not necessarily the best approach. I think for health, it's quite different. But that's why we really prefer a more binding sort of absolute product requirements approach for environmental issues.
Thank you very much. And that was the last question of the panel. And I think that would be best if you have some questions, then you could direct them after doing the networking session. There's lots of food and drinks for you to enjoy. And thank you to all the speakers, panelists, Alice, Oliver, Olga, and Julia for this illuminating discussion. And we heard tonight about the legal framework gaps, about the enforcement challenges and conditions in the EU promotion policies and the political resistance in Brussels and around the world, and the critical connection between labeling and environmental education. And what's clear is that mandatory vegan labeling is about creating this transparency, just food system that supports Europe's sustainability goals and empowers consumers to make choices aligned with their values. And let's give all our panelists a round of warm applause. Thank you all for being a part of this event. Enjoy your night, your drinks, and vegan food. Thank you.
Standard.
And please excuse me, persons, ladies and gentlemen, there is one more speech at the end from Sebastian.
Sorry, I'm not as well prepared as in the beginning. Sorry for correcting you. A lot of food, not now anymore. It's very empty because it was very, very delicious. Thank you all for being here. Now we can start continuing networking, talking together, and I hope that will be the beginning of a new chapter in labeling in Europe. Thank you very much for all being here.